Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking this lesson. The beginning of this lesson will be a short lecture on anatomy, as well as a few examples of how the nose and the mouth was painted by other artists. And then I'm going to do a demonstration on how to paint the nose and the mouth. What we're seeing here is the beginning of the nose. On the skull, it's a very short nasal bone. This is a part of the nose that is very similar to everyone, no matter what nationality they are, race, or whether they're young or old. So you have a nasal bone, and then you have lateral cartilage, which attaches, and it kind of has a triangle shape from one side. And then you have a glabella, which is a keystone. That's how the nose bridge fits into the space between the eyebrows. So first we have glabella, nasal bone on the skeleton. And then from lateral cartilage, you have a ball of the nose, which consists also of cartilage of two parts of them. And on some noses, and I think on her, you can see a slight division. Let me see, increase. You can see on a point of the nose a slight indication of those two parts. You can also see how the cartilage enters into the bowl of the nose. And then the hook of the nose, the bottom plane of the nose, is the septum that attaches into the bone of the muzzle. And then the other side plane of the nose is called maxilla. This is all anatomy that you need to know. But structurally, nose consists of three parts. It's a bridge of the nose, the bowl of the nose, and the wings. The bridge of the nose consists of the bone and cartilage. The bowl consists of only cartilage, and the wings are just a fat tissue. Common mistake when people paint the noses is when they paint the wing of the nose, they forget to indicate the thickness of that wing, so it doesn't look like a paper thin. So often you can see either a little highlight or a shadow to indicate the thickness of the wings. Let's look at the skeleton from the profile. And again, just to show you how short the bone is, and it's really protruding out. What the nose does after that bone is really very personal, and that does depends on the race, age, ethnicity. Notice how the shape of the mouth is really like a bowl. It's like an apple that got stuck between the jaw and the cheekbone. So that would explain how the mouth has to be painted as it is placed on a round surface, because it is. So here's an example of different noses in different ages. So you can see how this nose is pointing out, and it's relatively short, and the bone probably ends here, and then cartilage ends here, and then a bowl of the nose. Everyone also has a very different relationship between the space from the base of the nose to the lips. So notice how this nose is very different. The bowl of the nose is pointing down, and the nasal bone is still pointing up, but then the cartilage connecting to the bowl is also slopes down. So articulation of the profile
shows individuality of this particular nose.
and you can see how highlights, because highlights always fall in the corners, they also change the direction, really following that structure. So notice such a short space from base of the nose to the lip. Notice how you can draw a 45-degree line from the nose to the upper lip and to the bottom lip. So all of that is aligning. Placement of the nose, you can always take the corner of the eye and create a diagonal that will lead you to the base of the nostril. Septum will be shorter than the wings. That proportional alignment is only true for the wings, not to the ball of the nose. And then the placement of the mouth, if you take a diagonal and drop it down to the corner of the mouth, you will find the beginning of the mouth. Now, this is definitely very manly nose. Yeah, it has a lot of structure, a lot of definition. Again, you can probably easily recognize the change of the bone into the cartilage, into the ball. And this is just really shows how different it changes the structure of the nose. It can be very wide nostrils, less defined nose bridge. So here it's almost like a very slopey heel from the cheekbone to another side of the cheekbone. It's not a very defined frontal plane. And the bowl of the nose is wider and the wings of the nose are also very wide.
Now let's look how other painters approached painting noses in different styles. Some are tighter and some are very painterly.
In the way I designed this lecture is I went from less painterly to very painterly style. So this is someone that probably had a really good drawing to start with. And you can see how the paint applied very thinly, and there is no evidence of search, a history of brushstrokes, meaning that it's kind of painted by matching the color and the values to the model, but nonetheless, very beautiful painting of the nose. And notice how the shadow really holds that nose together and shows the structure of it. So here's a little bit more painterly, a little more Sargent-like painting, very soft edge. Notice how you can come from your left cheekbone all across, and the shadow is not as strong as it is here. Yeah, this is a very warm, dark shadow. Here, the shadow is more airy, more cooler. You can almost pass through that nose bridge to have an opening. Okay, just quickly, another painting of the nose that has very little shadow. The shadow is only on the bottom plane of the nose, but not on the sides. This is another way of painting. Notice how the detail in the shadow of the bottom of the nose is very quiet. It's not a lot of reflective light. It's kept mysterious. And the nose doesn't feel very structural. It kind of feels very flat because it receives so much light. In this portrait, I have a little bit of a problem because the painter doesn't use color to pull the nose out towards the viewer. It's all pretty much the same saturation, the same color, and just using the values. And the nose, as we will be talking, is a smaller part on the face. So theoretically, it cannot be lit up more than your cheekbone or your forehead. This is, of course, Sargent. You can see how very beautifully he describes nose with maybe 4 brush strokes. So simple, very strong shadow shape, very sharp edge on the bowl of the nose. The nostrils have a variation of the edge work, but it's pretty defined and it's pretty contrasty. Notice how the nostril is not a hole, but more like a comma shape. Common mistake is to make it feel too round. And then there is a beautiful red shadow and a wing of the nose on the bottom, and it has also quite sharp edge. But then the information on the bridge of the nose and the bowl of the nose inside of the light is very subtle, just a few variations of temperature and the highlight, but you can really feel the structure of that.
In this painting, artist chooses to almost lose most of the definition of the nose except the beginning and its end.
Shadows from the eye sockets really start up that nose. And then the bridge of the nose is pretty much the same color and volume, very subtle variation from the cheekbones. And then she just puts the cast shadow from the nose on the muzzle and the bottom plane of the nose. And that becomes a finish of the nose. So in this painting, the eyes and the mouth definitely have more weight and priority than the nose. And sometimes it's just aesthetic decision how you want to portray the nose in a person, whether it's going to be very defined, darker value, brighter highlights, or it just can be defined in the beginning of the nose and the bottom plane of the nose. So different solutions.
In this painting, Mancini chooses to define nose in the beginning and the end and completely wash away the shadow by allowing the air to pass through the nose bridge to create the openness of the face. But the structure of the nose is very well defined just by having a dark shadows and a strong highlights.
Rembrandt self-portrait, just to show you beautifully painted nose. Look at the paint quality on this portrait, using paint as a sculpting of space and how you can see the layering of the paint and the history of the brushstroke put on top or coming through. It's a really beautifully tactile way of painting. And you can see even on the wrinkles of his forehead or the texture of his nose that you can feel the older, porous skin. The way the paint is used is really to portray the age and the quality of the surface that the light reflects. It's not a smooth, a beautiful young skin. And when you have time, also look at how Rembrandt uses his edges. It's just very, very intelligent. This is another painter which I thought somewhat similar to Rembrandt in how dramatic light is. You can see how dark and mysterious the shadow shape on the bottom of the nose is. You don't see any definition of beginning and the end of the wing or the nostril. It's just one solid shape to really hold that bright light streaming down on that nose. This is more impressionist painter, Russian painter. And again, this is definitely a painting that doesn't have a very strong nose. It's not well defined. There is no highlight. And that's, of course, explained that she's in the shadow of the tree. And so there is less information to put in to really show the structure. But again, the emphasis of that face is truly on a triangle of the eyes and the mouth rather than having a nose to be distracted from it. So it's, I think, painted with a purpose of really draw your attention to the eyes and the mouth. And here's another more impressionistic painting of Nikolai Blakhin, of his ballet dancer. Again, here a very warm shadow, and then he uses a secondary light. You can see how the wing on the left side is also has a reflective light. So you have this shadow shape that is just streaming down on the nose bridge, down the bowl. But the reason why I brought this slide is to show you that your primary light is always stronger and always more opaque and brighter than your secondary reflective light. So keep that relationship together, because if you make your reflective light too strong, you're going to break the structure of the shadow.
This last slide is painting by Ilya Repin of his friend Mizulsky,
who was in his last 4 days of his life. He painted him in a hospital, and you can see how much color Repin uses in his nose. It's very red. I put that slide almost as a warning that sometimes we can use too much red and it becomes almost cartoony. Now, not in this painting, because he died from alcoholism. So the redness of the nose is a part of his disease. And so that's how Repin saw it, and that's how he painted.
Now, let's talk a little bit about anatomy of the lips and the mouth.
The one that kind of has its own name is tibicular. It looks like a key shape in the middle, and then two side planes. And you can see how they rounding off, they are chiseling the round surface of the muzzle. Again, the biggest mistake you can make is to paint the mouth as if it's sitting on a straight line. And the lower lip has two pillars, and they kind of are facing a little bit towards each other. And you can see it by the tilt of the highlight, that it's tilted slightly down. Upper muzzle is always rounded, and it has, depending on the light source, always transition from light to shadow. And the same thing, the low part of the structure of the mouth, but they are more of a planes, the side planes you can see, and also the arch that's arching out, and that's usually is in shadow because it's receding back, and then the chin box is coming towards us. The corners of the mouth is very important because you have all the muscles that create our articulation and gesture or movement of the lips are gathered here. So there is almost like a bean bag, the notes, but they shaped almost like a bean bags, and they have a softer edge on the top and a sharper edge on bottom. This is a detail of Antonio Mancini painting, and it's just show you how painterly he approached the lips, and how there is almost like an open line on the lower lip. You can just go from the beginning to the end, and it has a more of a freedom and an opening, while the top lip is definitely has a stronger shadow.
This concludes anatomy and slide presentation, and now the painting demonstration. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for taking this lesson. The beginning of this lesson will be a short lecture on anatomy, as well as a few examples of how the nose and the mouth was painted by other artists. And then I'm going to do a demonstration on how to paint the nose and the mouth, and how to think about it as a feature on a bigger form. One of the difficulty to demonstrate how to paint the nose and the mouth is that we don't want to paint individual features when we paint the portrait. What we want to do is paint one single idea of light spilling over the face of the person and over the features, and sculpt the features as that light spilling over the forms. So today I have a very simple palette that you can find in description of my art supplies. For my medium, I'm using Merage. My board is toned with transparent red oxide mixed with just a little bit of phthalo blue to create this brown olivey tone. And it's a little wet because I didn't do this in advance. I would prefer you to tone your panel and paint on a dry surface, but it's also, as I will demonstrate, very possible to do wet into the wet. So I will start by taking a little bit of my medium and taking the same paints that I use for toning, transparent red oxide and a little bit of phthalo blue, mixing it together. And the reason I'm choosing these colors because they're going to be a part of my shadow shapes. They're going to be a part of my hair shape. It would be a good paint to use for my block in. If you saw any of my previous lessons, whether it's a still life or portrait, I don't start from a pencil drawing or a charcoal drawing. I start from direct blocking in the big shapes. Reminder how to hold your brush. We put the brush in a soft place, really just holding it very gentle, and letting the brush stroke take place from the whole arm, from the shoulder, rather than using our wrist and our fingers. Holding the brush back will allow you to really see what you're doing instead of blocking it half of what you're doing with your hand. It also will allow you to really make a beautiful brush strokes in all the directions. Let's start by just thinking of almost like a big envelope, big shapes, and we'll try to fit it into our size of our panel. Today I'm using In the Glow panel, and once I see what my shape will be, then I will just take my paint and allow to go my brush side to side, feeling the flow of that big shape into my canvas. There is a little bit of a neck on the back. His chin really comes forward towards his chest, and the shoulders like a bowl, round on the back, and the chest coming forward. But again, today, to really concentrating on the features, so I'll just do a little bit of indicating the other features just to have a better sense of placement of the nose and the mouth. Every painting starts from a problem of size and placement. Two questions: where to put it and how small or big to make the object. Go lower this shoulder, allow the neck come forward, looking at the neck as a simple cylinder, and then we'll find our anatomy within that, blocking cast shadow shape on the shoulder and the neck, and then coming back and looking again at the simple egg shape. What you can do is find the placement for the nose first, and it will be right on a half mark from the top of the head to the chin, somewhere here, the bottom of the nose. Everything we do right now is really just the first guess, just the first statement. We definitely will have time to rethink everything we do and make it more concrete and accurate. But right now we're just thinking about the nose going back, and somewhere here, glabella, the keystone shape, where the nose is wedged into eyebrow shape, and where the corner of glabella and nasal bone is starting to come forward towards the bowl of the nose. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of time to place my eyebrow. And since the head is tilted, the eyebrow is tilted in the same direction. And somewhere here, we'll have the shapes of the eyes, which again is not the focal point of our class today, but I still would like to have it placed. And once I approximate my eyes, I can take the corner of the eye and make a diagonal to place the base of the nostril. And also I can take the tear duct and drop the line down and find the placement of the nose. And that's the shadow shape for the nose, side plane. This is a maxilla, the side bone of the nose. And then this would be the bowl of the nose with the wings. The bottom plate of the nose is in shadow, and then it casts the shadow on the muzzle or the mouthpiece. And then right away we'll start kind of defining the placement of the mouth, and it will be somewhere here. And without really any drawing of the mouth, I'm just going to give a couple strokes just to kind of have the first feel of where it will be, and then I will sculpt it out with the paint, and then I'll just put the shadow shape to the side of the face, coming forward on the cheekbone, coming to the mouth, thinking about the tilt, a little cast shadow under the mouth, coming across the chin, and then across the neck. And that shadow at this point will be connected. And then I'm just going to wipe slightly the form to be clean. Connect the light through. And then carve out with the hair the cheekbone that goes behind and coming forward. Tilting the face. Just simply find the shadow shapes. All of this eyeball is in shadow because it belongs to the side plane. Just gonna take a few more seconds. You know, one thing about the painting is the slower you start, the faster you finish. Sometimes when we are too much in a hurry, we make more mistakes and then it takes more time to fix it. So without wanting to be too precise, because that's not the point, I'm just taking my time. Finding bigger shapes. Will be the ear with the hair. Darkening the hair to set up the light for the face. And again, even though today's lesson is how to paint the lips and the mouthpiece and the nose, we have to set up a little bit of the whole shape to place our features. So I'm just taking a little smaller brush and I would find the tear duct and a little bit of the eye, a detail of the eye, and after that we'll just start the same tilt applies to the eyes, the mouth, and the nose. The eye went too far. Yeah, moving it a little bit closer. All right. So what I'm going to do next, once I've done my sketch, and really we can even somewhat forget about the placement of the lips at this point. We will find them later, so we'll keep them somewhat undefined. And then we'll take Terra Rosa or English Red, whatever you have as a paint. We will move it into our shadow shape. And then take a little bit of cadmium yellow, deep, warmer yellow, mixed into that. And we'll try to see what the shadow shape will look. I think that's dark enough. So I will take my bigger brush, take your medium, and just make sure that the shadow shape is nice and warm. And just start by putting on the side plane of the face. And as you put, you are very much still thinking of each shape, and you're also making brush strokes. So brush stroke describes the movement of the plane. You change the direction of how you pull your brush depending on what the plane you're describing, you painting at the moment does. So you can see how my brush stroke is changing direction. Here, there is a cast shadow from eyebrow, then the form shadow, the cast shadow from eyebrow, the eyebrow turning to the side plane, the cast shadow on the top of the upper eyelid, through eyeball, on the bottom eyelid, a little bit on the bottom plane of that eye bag. And then from glabella, right here, from this keystone, just thinking if it's wide enough, and it doesn't really have a lot of sharp edge here, which we can create the edge as well later, but we'll create a side plane of the nose, moving the paint down the plane of maxilla, and then coming to the bowl of the nose, painting the shadow across bowl of the nose and the bottom plane, the hook of the nose, the nostril, and the wing. The bottom plane will be completely connected as one without much definition. And then putting the cast shadow over the muzzle shape, making sure that it's rounding off here as the muzzle is a round shape itself. And then again, we'll take this shadow shape and just put a little color for the lips, for the whole shape. And you'll see how we will carve out eye back shadow shape here. Tear darkens in shadow. And then we'll using the same shadow shape on all the shapes of the face, all the bottom planes and all the right-hand side planes. Cast shadow over the neck, all one color, one value, starting as simple as possible and knowing that the shadow is always absence of light. It's always one value. Shadow cannot be lighter or darker, but what does happen is that reflective light comes and makes the shadow lit up. So it's not that the shadow gets darker or lighter, it's the secondary light that illuminates that shadow. We'll have time to do that. Even we can spread it on a short as well. We're gonna take a little bit of transparent red oxide again with just a small amount of phthalo blue, balance it into the warmer dark, and just darken the bottom plane of the hair. So the same planes that facing downwards or the side planes on the right, giving a little bit mass for the hair, kind of an unruly hair. Cast shadow over one piece of hair laying on top of another, depth, and that's probably enough of the darkness of the hair. 1 second. I think I might need to, make the chin a little bit longer. But again, we start painting from being very abstract, very general, and then we'll find our way into more and more correctness and becoming more specific with the shapes and more accurate as the painting develops. Okay, so shadows are all set up. Now we're gonna start painting the light. I'm gonna take size 4 brush and I'm gonna start making the light. So I'm gonna bring a medium into my white. I'm gonna mix it in so it's nice and movable and flowing. I'm gonna take a little bit of cooler yellow to the side of it. Gonna take a little bit of cadmium red light again to the side of it. And I'm looking for not a pinkish coloration, but first more yellow coloration skin. Maybe I'll try a little bit of yellow ochre to give just slightly more color to it. And I'm gonna try my first brush stroke on a frontal plane of the forehead. That feels good. That feels lit up enough. And so now I'm just gonna make a frontal plane of forehead. Then I'm gonna take a little bit of ultramarine blue, just a little bit, take a little more yellow ochre, create just slightly more greenish feel to the paint, and then put it on the top of the plane of the forehead and slide down to the side plane of forehead. Bringing a little bit more color to the side plane, darkening slightly the light by introducing a little bit more color. I can take a tiny bit of my violet to desaturate some of it even more. The changes of value is very minimum. Mostly it's the changing of temperature. I'm gonna take a little bit more red, warmer red, and put across of the forehead, coming up. This is a little bit too much of red, but this is where the muscle that are responsible for moving your eyebrows are, and I would like that part of the forehead come forward. So I'm using my warmer colors to bring that anatomy forward, while I'm gonna tuck in the glabella nesting between eyebrows by adding more greenish tone to it, more neutral tone. So we started from a brightness of the frontal plane. We added a little bit of a coolness to go back to space. We added a little bit of warmth to the side plane, and then we added a little bit of warmth to the most protruded area of the forehead to come towards us. And then again, we added a little bit of a coolness for this shape of glabella to tuck under. And then we're gonna add a little bit of warmth to just slightly pull out the bridge of the nose. And then before I paint the bridge of the nose, I'd like to paint the bowl of the nose. So I'm gonna add even more red and more yellow ochre, just slightly darken the bowl of the nose and warm it up, and bring the top of the bowl forward and sculpt the hook, the bottom of the nose, and then gently move that paint towards the bridge of the nose, but now adding a little bit more yellow and removing the red from the paint and moving it towards the light of the nose. So it's done a little bit crudely now, but I will find the way to bring it together like this. And then the wing of the nose will be just slightly cooler because it's a side plane than the bowl of the nose. Okay. But still relatively darker than the cheek and the muzzle piece around it. So, and then to finish this, I will take a little bit more yellow ochre and paint the side plane of the nose. One of the common mistakes when people paint the nose, they don't finish the nose where the side plane of the maxilla ends and meets the cheekbone, and the same from the shadow shape. So you often see somebody painting the light all the way here and having the dark line just at the corner of the nose, and it feels they lose the definition of this meeting place of one plane into the side plane, of one plane into the side plane. So we're gonna work on it to define it. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is take a little bit of a cooler yellow and a little bit of alizarin, a cooler red, mix in, and then use that to create a highlight. And we know that highlight sits always in the corner of the form. So it will sit on a frontal plane of the nose bridge and flow down. It will get a little bit in the corner of that glabella and the nose bridge. And of course, it will also sit on the plane of the top of the bowl to the frontal plane of the bowl, and define that in. And it will also be at the corner of that maxilla and the cheek, but we can do that later. But since we're doing our highlights, let's just gather a little bit more paint and also make a nice juicy highlight on the forehead, flowing down and on the corner of that eyebrow. So don't worry if it's a little too big or a little too sharp on the edge. We will have time to come and refine it. Since this is a lesson on how to paint the nose, let's just bring a side plane of the cheek, give a little bit more color, and bring the turning plane of the cheek forward with a little more warmer color again to make sure it's going forward, and then introduce a little bit of more neutral color, whether it's a violet or a little raw umber, and move the cheekbone back with less of the color in. Bring a little bit more warmth with red, and even maybe a touch of shadow shape, and put it on a side plane, holding that cheek and separating it slightly from nose shape. Just sculpting that cheekbone coming forward. Sorry, I took too much alizarin. But what I'd like to do is just come with a little bit more bluish violet and come into the eye, maybe even a little bit more. Cut the eye out, and then maybe just with a smaller brush, come with the bottom plane. Okay. Bringing the shadow shape and just softening the edge on that glabella and leaving a sharper edge on the bottom that is created by the eyebrow, and then adding a little bit more raw umber into the mix and just allowing this plane tuck under, making it slightly different color while taking a little bit more light with yellow and cadmium red and just painting the piece of light falling on the top of the upper eyelid, sculpting out the eye. And then we're gonna take a little bit of more raw umber. So anytime I need to cool off my skin tone, I can use either my gray violet or a little bit of raw umber, and I'm putting it, maybe even a little bit more, on a hollow place of a cheek. But I think I like it a little more greener coloration rather than the violet. So I'm changing that and bringing even a little bit more greener coloration down the jar. And this is where we're gonna start sculpting the mouth. And then we'll come back to the nose. And the bottom of the nose we will sculpt by sculpting the mouthpiece. So that's what I'm gonna take. I'm gonna take a little bit more yellow into my white, create more light, and create a different coloration from a cheekbone to the mouth. So here with the light, I'm gonna sculpt away the wing of the nose with the cast shadow and move it all the way across the lips and bring it down to the side plane where canine tooth is. About this, we'll have a little bit of more light, and then moving across. And then I'll add a little bit of red. Again, what we did here, we're gonna, or in the nose, we use the warmer light to move this a little bit more in front. So here, I'm colorizing this a little bit more warmer, and in the similar matter, I'm gonna bring a little bit of a gray, green color to the side of the mouth to get that side plane. Just to recapture, using white and mostly yellow, I painted the whole roundness of that muzzle piece. By adding a little bit of warmth, I pulled out the top part of that muzzle shape. And by allowing a little bit of a gray green tone, I put that muzzle piece connected into the side plane of the cheek. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back to the nose and bring a little bit of my violet into the skin tone. And I'm gonna come back and create just this very slight passage next to the shadow as a transition. And then coming back to my shadow shape, bringing it back into the space. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, it came out a little bit too light. So I'm gonna just darken it back. I will need some reflective light, but I don't want to lighten the whole shadow shape. And so now I'm gonna just work a little bit more on sculpting the bottom of the nose. I will take a little bit of more red and just paint a shape, almost like a rectangular shape of a nostril. And what it is, it's a combination of two shapes, one that belongs to the nostril and one that belongs to the bottom cast shadow. And so there is this little V shape that separates them. The corner here, that is the corner that separates the wing of the nose from a cast shadow moving across the muzzle. And then the same shadow falls very lightly into that philtrum. And then bringing down the shadow shape over the light to soften the edge. And then taking a little bit of a darker, warmer, transparent red oxide and carving out the nostril. In fact, I just need a little better brush for that carving out. So maybe this brush will have a little more shape. Carve out and simplify again the shadow shape. And then coming and just adding a little bit of a reflective light. We want to make sure that it doesn't come too close to the value of our light. So always keep in mind, sometimes you will look at your reference and it will feel like you have quite a bright reflective light. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that go so dark. Okay, and then we can put a little bit of a cooler light on the top of the nostril. And then maybe tuck in a little bit of the warmer behind the nostril, but very lightly because we don't want to give a big crease. It's a young face. It doesn't have too much of the crease. So just making sure that you're not digging into the skin too much and allowing this to be lit up and the light come in all the way and then maybe just a little bit more color coming down here to really show the division between the frontal plane and the side plane. It's gonna be a little bit lit up by highlights between the tear duct and the side plane of the nose. Okay. So slowly it's gonna shape up and be a little bit more color. It is lit up. Here we can just look at the edge work and see what the shape and the edge might do here, a little bit more softer with the light able to come in and reflect into that. And the same thing with the light being able to come in through here and reflect or light up some of that shadow. Okay. All right, so let's see if we can bring a little bit of that reflective light into the wing of the nose and then leave the cast shadow form. All right. And just to define that cast shadow, I'm gonna put a little bit of a light on the cheek. So, and here I have to come back to my shadow shape and just bring all of this in shadow again and allow the light move a little bit this way, similar to the other cheek that is lit up. So everything needs to be symmetrical. Putting the top plane of the eyelid here, making it a little bit warmer as it comes out of the shadow, and then we can make it lighter. Coming back to the shadow again and trimming down that light. So we always walk as if we were as sculptors. If we took too much clay and made the form too big, we just come back and we pinch that clay to less. If we took too much of that clay out, we just come back and add that clay in. And that's what I'm doing. If I put too much light, then I come back with the shadow and trim that light back in its place. And if I didn't put enough of the light and the shape feels too small, then I just add the light. So this process of sculpting something with the paint is very much resembles the actual sculpting, adding and bring it back, adding and bring it back. So we really are able to paint from unknown, from very general shape, very big shape, to more concrete shape. And we adjust till the last brushstroke. We don't stop to adjust. But it brings a quality to the painting that is very different. It creates a history that otherwise could not exist in the painting if you don't go searching for shapes, if you just painting from already known space of the drawing, of precise drawing. So to me, this is so much more interesting. And I find that I learn so much more by making mistakes and trying to correct them. And it builds the confidence that I can find it, that I might travel a little bit longer in searching of them, but I will find them. I will just connect this light through softening the edge here, even though it's a cast shadow, but now this shape, it's further away from light, so it's a little bit darker. The contrast is not as much, but this is where the shaping of the lip will start. Okay, I just simplify all my shadows back. And you can leave your painting like that. It's okay. We don't need too much details in the shadow if you don't want them. So it's a aesthetic choice, but if you feel, you can carve out the nostril again, and we can add a little bit more reflective light on that nose wing and show the end of the form. Making the shadow just a little bit lighter. Just one little edge here. Soft the edge, it's a edge of the hair, so cannot have too much sharpness here. And here, if we could make this read as this coming from the back forward, and this shape overlapping that shape. So that would be a good description of two planes, this plane coming forward, this edge softer, and this one is even softer because this light illuminates the hair as well. Especially you can see it on him. Softer edge. All right, so let's get back to that light coming down, and then a little bit more color on the very bottom of the nose to bring it forward. moving the shadow slightly back, bringing a little bit more color right at the bridge of the nose. Okay. And then one more thing is that when the light hits that front plane, there is a space here where the light can escape and open up some of that shadow. So what you often will see is a little passage of it where the light is able to escape from the top. So you will see a little bit of an opening into that side plane of maxilla, but then make sure you have just a little bit more light at the cheek, meeting that maxilla. All right. And then for the lips, one thing what we want to understand with the lips, that they are sitting on a curvature, on a round shape structure of our teeth. And so one of the common mistakes is to paint the mouth as it's sitting on a flat surface. It's not. It's sitting on a rounded surface. So it will do something like this, coming out and then go back. So if I were to take a little bit of alizarin into my transparent red oxide and just indicate now when I have my nose established, I can think about the corners of the lips coming across in a round surface and finding the other edge of the mouth, which is here, and they're gonna have the same tilt. Then I can take a little bit of alizarin with transparent red oxide and just slightly indicate my shadow shape on the right side planes. That's kind of already there. And the upper lip is tilted 45 degrees downwards. So it will be in shadow. The light will not reach it. But because the bottom lip is so lit up that it's often very much illuminated by the light. So if I paint my lower lip just a little bit more redness into it, as just two pillars coming towards each other like this. Yeah. And then the light from this shoots on the top of that lip. So I can wash out some of that shadow away. And then I'll take a little bit of more red and bring it to the very protruded area of the bottom lip and allow a little bit more color in the most protruded area. And then come and just change the cast shadow to flow down the lip this way. And then use a highlight. And the highlight, because of the wetness of the lip, usually is a little bit brighter than the highlights on the skin. because the skin is not wet, but the lips are often are. So, and the highlight is floating down the form of that pillar shape, like this. And then I can take a little bit of transparent red oxide with alizarin and just slightly form corner, and then the middle, and then an edge again. And then I can put a little bit more color into this part of the lip, and then bring a light of the skin of the mouth on the top, and really bring a little bit of a highlight and shape to the lip from the top. And then again, bring a little bit more color and allow this light to come just slightly down by bringing more color to that piece. And then I'll take a little bit of yellow ochre with red and wash away some of that edge, that column of the side plane. Okay, so the lip here will have an open edge into the skin. And then another piece of highlight belonging to the lip is in the corner right here. And there is a slight shadow from the nose shape. So I'm bringing a little bit of raw umber and yellow ochre and bringing a little bit of coloration of green underneath here. Didn't quite show up, so I'll do a little bit more. From the corner of the mouth, there is a little bit of a darkening. And from the top of that corner, there is a little bit of a light on the top of that node. And then it's flowing into the box of the chin. And the planes here are all greenish gray, because now the planes of the face is facing down, except the box of the chin, which can come back to a little bit of a warmer coloration. First, maybe a little bit more yellowish coloration on the top of that chin, forming the arch of that plane under the lip, and the cast shadow over the box of the chin, and a form shadow on the side plane. And then just bringing even a little bit more greenness in the side plane, but then maybe bringing a little bit more warmer temperature color to the top of that box to come forward. So notice how this brush stroke here is the most protruded place of the chin coming out. But the brush stroke here is a brush stroke that's already tucking under the chin. So it has more green coloration. And that green coloration can be shared with the column of the neck. So here we'll have somewhat very close relationship between the jaw and the neck. So we're not gonna have a lot of separation, except maybe a little bit of a piece of light right at the beginning of that column of the neck. And the same thing here, we can light up the jaw slightly because the bone of the jaw catching a little bit more light here. But allow a little bit of this form to come in and the light of the jaw come behind it. Yeah, just like what it does. So that's how we'll separate these two forms from each other, because one really overlaps on top of another. And then again, we can push a little bit of that cheekbone with slight warmer color forward right here, the most protruded place of that cheekbone coming out by the use of this color, and then tuck away with less. Just like a little piece of this warmth sharing here and on the most protruded area of the eye before it starts to tuck in. Okay, and then I'll use the darkest, warmest accent on the eye right underneath the eyelash, and then bring a little bit of just a hint of the color on the bottom of that eye, just very slightly, and then bring a little bit of highlight on the bottom of the eyelid right here. Again, pulling it out in space towards me. I'm just gonna double check, creating just a little bit more color around highlight to pull it forward and separate the bowl of the nose from a little bit of more cooler top of the wing of the nose in. And then here it just comes to the side of the nose. Bringing a little bit of the highlight in the corner of that eye bag meeting side plane of the nose and the top plane of tear duct can be lit up. A little bit of that light wanting to come here and also swing down. Maybe a little bit of that light on the top of the heel, but still wanting to keep the shape a little bit darker because it's smaller. And one rule you want to always apply is that smaller shapes on the face will receive less light. So the nose being a smaller shape and the eyelids being a smaller shape on the bigger shape of the face will be generally darker than the cheekbones. So just a little bit what I noticed with my cheek, this is one shape so this is when we're painting highlights, make sure that you see that this is one shape coming up and that is another shape coming down. So those are two different shapes and they have two different highlights. It's not a smiley face like that. It's has a nature of two highlights. Okay, we can probably give a little bit more light just on the top of that eyebrow shape and connect it to this piece. Bring a little bit of gray violet into connection here to soften the edge. And then pick up a little bit of the light of the ear. Okay. Open this up. Allow this to be more lit up because it's on the lighter side. And move this slightly away to open up, or maybe not, but we'll see. And then let's come back and bring a little bit of a reinforce this edge being just softer. Soft on the top and sharper on the bottom. Just bring a slight shadow on the top of this, while again emphasizing a little bit more color here. And then I'm gonna come back and just bring a little bit of a reflective light into this plane and make it just a little bit smaller. In fact, that was not done well, so a little bit more shadow back. Again, put a cross. Lost definition of the lips here. And if we want to find a slight definition of it, we can have a reflective light here And that's a form shadow, so very soft edge here as we coming. Okay, bringing maybe a little bit more darkness to the corner of the mouth. So this heart shape of the lip is called tabicular, and that's where you have one of the darkest accents underneath, with tabicular coming forward and casting the shadow. And then I'll just have to redo this highlight to change the shape of the lip. And then again. And then maybe allow a little bit more light pass. And if it's too little color, it's so easy to add a color to the lips. So I find that often we make our lips too colorful. So I almost rather them to be less color first and then add the color only to a little piece of them, like the front or where the shadow meets, and then make sure that you have shadow that's a little bit less color. Changing that definition slightly. Taking just a little bit off the edge to soften. Right now, I'm just working on the edges, making them a little softer, connecting the shapes, simplifying some of the shapes. And still very much working on the shapes of the planes. And maybe now just getting a little bit more light and putting the plane on the back of the neck. Leading a little bit more light to the front. Adding a little bit more color to come forward. Adding a little bit more color to allow the light to be less. as it drifts away. Notice how each brushstroke really describes the form. And then maybe coming back and just highlighting a little bit the top planes here and here. And so here you have the beginning of the edge, and then here you have almost disappearance of the edge, and then you have appearance of cast shadow, and then you have a little bit of reflective light from the t-shirt to the chin, very gentle, and then coming back and kind of stitching your shadow back into reflective light. And if the reflective light took too much of the shadow, then we'll just have repair, that little repair of bringing that shadow back, because the shadow is definitely more important than reflective light. It just is. It's a structure of your painting. It's the structure of your form. So you always give the shadow priority over the reflective light. And then we can just slightly darken the ear to go back and connect more with the hair shape. So we can almost paint it as one. And then maybe we'll just highlight the hair with just a little bit of cooler. And then maybe just take a little bit of that forehead and extend it. And then take a little bit of that curl of the hair and bring it forward. And then take the darkness of the hair and then maybe get a little bit of our medium. Bring the light to the t-shirt. To the shoulder. I decide to lessen the light so the light on the t-shirt does not distract from the light on the face. And then take a yellow ochre and use that to sculpt a little bit of the shape of the face. Simplify the shape. Okay. And then I'm just going to take more medium and take raw umber and cadmium red deep, a little bit of phthalo blue, a little bit of transparent red oxide. And I'd like to just contrast this use to sculpt some of the ear, some of the hair. And just add it into my background, making this side of the painting a little bit darker. Still very much refining. Painting is corrective process. Till the last brushstroke is painted, always thinking about the shapes, making them better, cutting into them, making the chin and the jaw more narrow. Putting a little more light on the base of the neck to separate from the column. The neck should be painted as a secondary supportive element, should not be as interesting, colorful, or light as the face. Now I am softening the edge of the crease to make him look younger. The deeper the folds, the older the person looks. Let's take a little bit of a light and just pass it through this and move this edge, off the edge. Bring this cast shadow, again, simple as one, to this and give it a little bit more direction to the cast shadow across the muzzle, and then take a little bit of more darkness and define the symmetry by just allowing a little bit more dark and just a shadow under the wings. Okay. And allowing the lip to connect in the edge here into the shadow, and bringing a little bit more light, moving back into the cheek, bringing a little bit more red color, just like on the other cheek, on the most protruded area, and allowing a little bit of a highlight come. Bring a little bit of more definition to a tear duct, and then a little bit of a pull down here. Take a little alizarin and just travel connect shadow shape underneath, and then allow a little bit of a light on the top plane. On the top plane, come in here and move this to a little less darkness. Bring a little bit more shadow, warmer shadow underneath here. Flow across, wrap around, and bring across the cheekbone area, all in shadow. Here. All right, so one thing I wanted to recap is that this edge of the lip is soft, the top edge is softer, only the bottom part of that lip gets a little bit of a highlight and makes it sharper. The edge of the lip here is lost, and the cast shadow is moving across the bottom lip, and the highlight is sitting a little bit on a diagonal. It's short, it's bright, and that it's allowing some of that light reflect into the top lip from a highlight. So one of the sharper edge is a little bit on the top, and then the other lip becomes more warmer and colorful because of the light catching on the top of the form coming through the lip. So there is a little bit of that highlight catching here. And spilling over. making small adjustments to the shapes and the edges, putting finishing touches. Sometimes it's hard to stop. There is more and more little gaps, little shifts that one wants to make. But at some point, the painting is done. I hope that this was a useful lesson how to paint mouth and the nose using a sculpting method. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I will see you again. And if you would like to study with me in person, please check out my workshop schedule on my website. Thank you so much again.